Prime Minister Carney has announced $35 billion for defence and infrastructure development in Canada's far north.
We are announcing a series of transformative initiatives that will help unlock the full potential of this vast region. Investments to defend our sovereignty and to deter new threats. Investments to connect, build, and transform northern and Arctic communities.
The $35 billion in investments are to fund improvements to defence and civilian infrastructure across the north, including $32 billion towards forward operating locations in Yellowknife, Inuvik, and Iqaluit, and at deployed operating Base 5, Wingoose Bay. The Mackenzie Valley Highway will connect Yellowknife to Inuvik and open up commercial opportunities along the 800-kilometre route. Nunavut will also be connected to Canada's national highway system through the Grays Bay Road. The 1,400 kilometres of year-round roadways will be given to the Major Projects Office. And finally, the Tolston hydro expansion will add 60 megawatts to the existing hydro system, doubling the Northwest Territories hydro capacity. For more on these announcements, we are now joined by Northwest Territories Premier R.J. Simpson. Welcome to the show. What are your concerns involving Arctic defence, and do you think these announcements do enough to address those concerns?
Well, when it comes to the hard defense of the Arctic, I leave that to the federal government. But I can say that when you look at the circumpolar world, Canada has the least infrastructure in that region, in our Arctic. Not just defense infrastructure, but just regular civilian infrastructure. And so these investments by the federal government are going to really change the landscape of the Arctic and our ability to defend it.
Now, you mentioned civilian infrastructure. These announcements are very defense-based, and yet also the Prime Minister did say some of them are what he called dual purpose. And I'm just wondering how those projects could impact development in your territory.
Well, we have a number of investments coming from the federal government. They've announced that there's going to be $5 billion in procurement for the Yellowknife forward operating location, as well as the Inuvik forward operating location, which is north of the Arctic Circle. Then yesterday, they announced the referral of our 3 major projects to the Major Projects Office. So the Mackenzie Valley Highway and the Arctic Economic and Security Corridor are actually roads that they were proposed almost 7 years ago by Prime Minister Diefenbaker at the time. And the Mackenzie Valley Highway is going to connect communities up and down the Mackenzie River Valley in the Northwest Territories, and for the first time ever have a connection from the southern part of the territory to the northern part. So it is dual use in that it will connect the forward operating location in Inuvik, but it's also very much a territorial highway that's going to connect families and connect communities and connect Canadians as well.
Now, you mentioned how long ago some of these things have been promised. Are you concerned about the lack of a firm timeline for some of these projects? Is there any skepticism or doubt because of how there have been a long record of unfulfilled promises, should we say?
Well, these are our projects as the government of the Northwest Territories and the Indigenous governments of the Northwest Territories. We're the ones developing these. We've been developing them for many years in some cases, and some of them are much closer to construction than others. The Mackenzie Valley Highway, for example, we can get shovels in the ground this summer on parts of it. And so I'm less concerned than I've ever been about the ability to get these going. We've never had this sort of full-throated support from the federal government that we are receiving now. And I know that when the Prime Minister puts his mind out to do something, he wants it done. And so we're now going to be working with the Major Projects Office, and we'll have their support. So I think we are in the best position we've ever been in to actually move these projects forward.
Thursday's announcement did span all 3 territories and even made a mention of a military base in Labrador. But there has been criticism from your counterpart in the Yukon that the territory, that his territory was essentially overlooked. What do you say to that?
I mean, everyone wants investments in their territory. I know that they've had limited defense investments in the Yukon, and through multiple governments, they've been advocating for this. So, I mean, they're doing what they feel like they need to do.
Do you feel, though, that can you see where the Yukon is coming from in terms of inequity in terms of the announcement yesterday?
Well, the Yukon and the Northwest Territories, we have a lot of similarities. When I travel to the Yukon, it does feel like I'm home. But there's also differences. So we're a much larger jurisdiction. We have less infrastructure. We don't have the same sort of highway infrastructure that they have in the Yukon. And so this is going to help bring us a little closer to parity. So I think that there is enough, and there's a lot of development that's needed across northern Canada. And so I know that the Yukon is also on the federal government's radar. And so I'm hopeful that we're going to see investments in all three territories.
Now, there was also criticism from the mayor of Whitehorse saying he would have liked more consultation from the PMO in advance of these announcements. What kind of consultation did you have with Prime Minister Carney or with the federal government ahead of the announcement?
I mean, for the past year, over a year now, every time I've met with Prime Minister or Minister Chartrand or any of the federal ministers, really, I have been pushing these three major projects. And so I say the speech that the Prime Minister made yesterday, it's a variation on the speech I've made many times, talking about why we need this infrastructure, the benefits of this infrastructure. And so the difference is that I was advocating that we do need it. He was saying that we are actually doing it.
Now, there has also been criticism that when you're looking at billions of dollars being invested here, that the priority should be civilian infrastructure, especially in terms of housing or schools, and that if that isn't the priority, it should at least have been part of this announcement and not just be all about defense. Your thoughts on that?
If there's a thought that this is all about defense, I want to dispel that right now, because these are nation-building projects that are going to provide benefits to civilians and the people of the territory and the people of Canada. Like I said, the Mackenzie Valley Highway will connect communities. It will connect families. The Arctic Economic and Security Corridor, that's going to open up the Slave Geological Province, which is one of the most mineral-rich places on Earth, to exploration and development. So there'll be mines there mining critical minerals, which Canada needs to really assert our sovereignty. So these go far beyond defense. They are, as the Prime Minister said, dual use, because they have civilian applications as well as military applications. That said, we're also working with Canada on the Build Canada Homes program to get more houses into the Northwest Territories. So there is a lot going on in other areas, and we're continuing to advocate for things like Jordan's Principle, which is very important in the Northwest Territories given our Indigenous population. So these are one piece of a much broader picture.
Yeah, you talk about how you're advocating for Jordan's Principle or how housing is still on the radar, but the North has a housing crisis, and critics feel that there's $35+ billion being announced, and none of that is for housing. Is that not a concern to the people of your territory?
I think that in the Northwest Territories, we have such an infrastructure deficit compared especially to Southern Canada, that the investments in the territory, we don't look at those and say, well, what's the problem with these investments? We say, we are thankful for these investments. These are things we've been advocating for years. The Mackenzie Valley Highway is going to make the price of goods and services and housing lower in those communities. So, you know, we welcome these investments. I don't see a downside to these. And we are working as a territorial government to get more houses on the ground. And we're working in partnership with the federal government to do the same thing as well. So there's a lot of exciting things happening in the territory.
Okay, thank you very much for your time today.